Hey, yo, everyone, we're live. Mike Crawford back again. Show 2 today. I can't believe I'm back again at night. Today's show earlier, the impromptu, was so easy to do. It really was. The night shows are a little, I don't know, but that's the prime time. We're back. I have a special guest tonight. We're going to get into with an investigative reporter, kind of covering the beat that I used to cover. That got me, got me seasoned to the realities of a lot of what goes on in the world. He's covering drug policy reform in Boston, in Massachusetts, and he's breaking news nationally and locally. He's exposed a lot of kind of strange stuff going on with this ballot initiative. And I think he's a supporter. I believe maybe we'll find out. But he's working with the Boston Institute of Nonprofit Journalism, and he's got stories in different outlets. I'm excited to bring him up on the show. If you got questions tonight, drop your questions. We're also going to probably take phone calls after about all the stuff that we were talking about earlier with Karen Reed specifically in the Vanity Fair. But to open the show, we're going to do this interview with Jack. Like I said, he's an investigative reporter. He's on a beat. He's breaking news. And it's Massachusetts. It's information that we all want to know. Like, what's going on with this ballot initiative to decriminalize psychedelics and the fight over it and kind of the controversy in terms of some shadiness going on. He's exposed, it seems like. He's got so many. He sent me all these stories. I'm just looking at them all like, wow. Ferrone's got Chris Ferrone, I think, is probably helping make this happen. Let's find out. Jack, how you doing tonight?
Hey, Mike, I am doing well. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
And you just posted this news story that we have on the screen here from DoubleBlind. It's titled "On the Campaign Trail for Psychedelic Reform in Massachusetts." What's this one about?
Yeah, so this is really, I guess, what a lot of national media outlets have not really covered, which is taking a closer look at some of the powers that be, politically speaking, and also from a frontline activist perspective that kind of make up both the yes on 4 ballot question 4 being, the psychedelics ballot initiative here in Massachusetts this election season, and the opposition campaign that's cropped up against them.
And what about this campaign that's cropped up against them? Because you've uncovered some stuff about them that's kind of troubling.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I guess I would start by saying, that if you Googled psychedelic policy reform, in Massachusetts, one of the groups that you'll see being referenced pretty often over the last 5 years is an organization called Bay Staters for Natural Medicine, which is, a local group here in Boston based in Jamaica Plain, I think formerly filed in Somerville. We can get into the paperwork of all of that later. But based on what you might read, you might think, based on mainstream coverage, that Bay Staters is kind of at the forefront of this movement. And for a while, that was true. And it, I got my start a little over a year ago working under Chris Ferrone, Talking Joints Memo and the Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism. And the very first event that I ever got paid to cover was a Bay Staters fall foraging event last October, actually. So I really started covering this on the front lines of what they were up to, and connected with, dozens of psychedelic advocates across the state. Really, it is, and I won't get into my TED talk on the broader national movement right now. It's not what we're here to talk about, but really is one of the most fascinating and really politically diverse movements of the 21st century. I will save that lecture for another time, but so I started covering Bay Staters events, and like I said, I got to know the founder, a guy named James Davis, fairly well. I worked with the communications director, a woman named Columba Klenner, in a part-time job separately at the same time as I started covering this beat. And after getting to know a number of different advocates across the space. Ferrone actually had tipped me off early on that he'd heard, some whispers that this guy might not really be who he seems. And, it was really fascinating to witness this group that, as far as it, you can tell based on some of the coverage that I'd seen previously, was really, the driving force behind Massachusetts. For those who might not be familiar or aware, there's 8 cities across the state here in Massachusetts that have deprioritized law enforcement, action or arrests, related to possession of, certain psychedelic substances. It varies in terms of which ones are included municipality by municipality. But to rattle off the list, it's Somerville, Cambridge, Provincetown, Salem, Amherst, Northampton, East Hampton, and Medford. And there's a number of others that have explored it and over years talked about it, a little bit on the local city council level. So there really was, already a pretty strong movement and support and awareness of decriminalizing or deprioritizing law enforcement activities surrounding the use of psychedelics. Really, there isn't a documented increase, in public harms. And there are 2 states prior to Massachusetts that have deprioritized. That have passed state level legislation related to psychedelics. The first was Oregon back in 2020. That was a psilocybin only, both decriminalization. They had a broad sweeping, drug decriminalization bill across the state that actually got peeled back. It's not really related to psilocybin, but psilocybin was affected by that. But then they also had what really is a psilocybin service center only model. So legal psilocybin assisted therapy services were legalized, but you're only able to get those services if you go to a service center. So it's been a bit of a mess. It's not a profitable system. So Colorado saw the shortcomings of that, and they introduced, and passed a bill that the Massachusetts model is based on. So it is both a statewide decriminalization of personal use and home cultivation of 5 specific psychedelics. So those are psilocybin, which we all know is, the psychoactive ingredient or the most popular one in your run-of-the-mill magic mushrooms. There's psilocin, which, for the sake of a brief scientific explanation, is just what your body turns psilocybin into. So it's not really the same thing, but it's included for the sake of legal clarity, not that it's this separate thing. But then there's also DMT, dimethyltryptamine, which is one of the active psychoactive ingredients in ayahuasca, for those who know that term being popularized but might not know what it is. Joe Rogan listeners and folks in that universe will obviously be aware of DMT and the supposed entities. I've not used it myself, but the supposed entities you meet when you break through, so to speak. Mescaline is another one, which is what peyote is extracted from. Mescaline is, a cacti. There's other psychoactive cacti that are actually federally legal, including San Pedro, which is, I know folks in Massachusetts already grow San Pedro and use San Pedro. Mescaline has also kind of been known, or referred to at times as like nature's MDMA by some, which is worth noting because MDMA was shot down, and MDMA, the therapy drug, was rejected by the FDA earlier this year, which set back the federal wave, which is kind of what makes what goes on in Massachusetts all the more important. But then the 5th one is Ibogaine, which is an interesting one because including in the decriminalization bill might make one think that it's like actively available, even if you haven't heard of it. For a very brief overview, Ibogaine is the psychoactive chemical that is extracted from the iboga bush, which is native to and really only available in West Africa, specifically in the small West African nation of Gabon, which is one of, they produce or have, the lion's share of the global supply of iboga. And it's also environmentally protected under UN law. So it's very difficult to get on a legacy market or decriminalized, I wouldn't know where to start finding Ibogaine. There's an interesting history to it, and it has shown incredible promise in treating substance abuse, severe substance abuse. I am not a scientist, nor am I a medical professional, but my very rough layman's understanding of what Ibogaine can do is essentially reset your brain's dopamine and other neurochemical receptors to baseline levels of production or normalized levels of production. And if you think about addiction as your brain becoming addicted to this one very particular external stimulus of that dopamine or serotonin or neurochemical release, the idea that being able to reset what a healthy level might be with just one use in a supervised setting, and Ibogaine has a whole host of potential, risks associated, cardiotoxic, and it has a nasty list of side effects. But it's an interesting one because from a clinical standpoint, incredible promise. But
Yeah.
from a
It's not. It's not. It's not even. It's funny too because I've seen a lot of back in the day. A lot of cannabis activists that were helping people get off the streets. Drug addiction. They would be all about the ibogaine, like
right,
Dana Beal and stuff. And it's just it's not a recreational drug like for
yeah,
that. It just you're using it to try to get someone off heroin. Like
exactly.
so like if it works, but it can be risky, obviously. There's some risk to it, and that's why it's been kind of outlawed, I guess. But
Yeah,
so this is great. I like this actually because I want to see people not get arrested for stupid shit like this. This is like people talk about freedom. Freedom is not to get arrested because you're on heroin trying to get off and you get arrested for ibogaine. I mean, it's just
yeah.
come
I would
on. So let's we're not legalizing we're legalizing stuff to get off of heroin, and
Yeah,
it's not even legalized really too on some of this, right? I mean,
yeah.
like what was the stuff that you exposed though? Because there is a political
Right.
underbelly to this that I want to talk about because I came up against this when I was kind of doing the same thing you're doing, covering the beat, the political movement at the state house and the fundraising and the policy people and the Dewey Square group, DSG. So
Yeah,
tell us about this stuff. What's been going on there with
yeah.
the competing interests and competing groups and shadow plays and all this other stuff that's been going on?
Yeah, so to bring it back to the group that I was covering when I first started all of this, kind of on the front lines, Bay Staters for Natural Medicine, like I said, if you look through some of the media coverage over the last few years, you would think that they were kind of the preeminent group, and in a lot of ways they were. It got smaller and smaller over time, in part, due to some of the behavior of their founder, James Davis, which I will get to. But so about a year ago, the organization that helped pass, kind of that led the campaigns both in Oregon and in Colorado, an organization called New Approach PAC, which for reference is a bit of a spin-off of the Marijuana Policy Project. Obviously was one of the groups that helped lead the recreational legalization campaign here in Massachusetts, but then also they partnered with, like you mentioned, Mike, Dewey Square Group, which was one of the driving forces behind, cannabis medical legalization, medical cannabis legalization, I should say. Back in 2014, I believe. So, sorry, losing my train of thought. So they teamed up, but sought at least based on, what was, said and accounted for at the time. And, and after the fact, we're in contact with Bay Staters, trying to get some sort of input on what, a ballot initiative and the parameters of that ballot initiative might look like. So initially, they proposed two models. One that did include the decrim that I just described, that also included, a 12-foot by 12-foot, no height limit, home grow enclosure. And we can get into the specifics of that later. But the other one did not. It was only that legal therapy access model. So assisted therapy services likely woven through private practices and not covered by state Medicaid, the cost of which is inevitably pretty expensive. Ultimately, New Approach and the Dewey Square backed, initiative, which was then known as Massachusetts for Mental Health Options and is now known, and anybody who sees a sign will see like the Yes on 4 campaign. They went with the dual decrim legal access therapy model, which at the time, Bay Staters for Natural Medicine claimed was in part due to pressure that they had put on the PAC to go with that option. So the first red flag surrounding Bay Staters was an article that I came out with in February where very quietly, without really letting a lot of folks in the grassroots community know, despite a lot of hemming and hawing about outside regulatory capture, And in corporate fear mongering, Bay Staters had accepted a $35,000 donation from the PAC late last fall, not long after which they very publicly began criticizing various measures of the initiative. So one can say, oh, they were basically being bribed, or so to speak. But it's also worth noting that not long after I reported that Bay Staters accepted that donation, it was actually provided with a series of emails, correspondence between Bay Staters and the campaign dating back as far as last summer, where Bay Staters was provided repeated opportunities to give specific input on the parameters of the bill as it was written, and declined to offer any of the substantive criticisms that they had provided in the weeks following accepting that donation. So this is the very first article that revealed the $35K donation. And it's also worth noting in this article that the Yes on 4 campaign did not necessarily get off to a smooth start either. And credit to Bay Staters and to Harvard law professor Dr. Mason Marks, who runs the Psychedelic Week Substack, because they were able to catch some canvassers on camera at the time, collecting signatures outside of a Whole Foods in Jamaica Plain, that, according to the per the transcript, and they got it on a hot mic, were providing some misleading info to potential signature givers, including identifying themselves as volunteered when they were paid. Now, I think it's pretty standard fare that some of these canvassers get paid. I'm not saying that I'm for that or against that. I don't think it's surprising that they were. And I think it's fair to say that they probably weren't especially well-trained college kids, $22 an hour, standing outside of Whole Foods talking about, hey, sign this and we might legalize psychedelics. This is, not a very robust or thorough signature gathering, operation in terms of the training. And I'm not here to assess whether or not that's good or bad. And I also think, they should probably have been better about it. But I do think, it is worth noting that smooth sailing and, clean cut, operations were not necessarily, at the forefront of the S on 4 operation initially. That said, I do give them credit for, after having some bad blood with grassroots activists in Oregon and Colorado in particular, they were able to forge some relationships and bring on a pair of grassroots activists that were previously very heavily intertwined and involved with the Bay Staters operation. A woman named Jamie Morey, who serves as their educational outreach director, community engagement coordinator, and Graham Moore, who is their educational outreach director. Both of them were both previously award-winning volunteers for the Bay Staters operation, and were kind of won over by the opportunity to have a substantive, input on the direction and message of this campaign. And at least compared to that of Oregon and Colorado, I would argue that there has been some sort of more substantive effort on the part of the New Approach operation. I think that, may have more to do with fear of image problem than, sign of, dedicated commitment to grassroots priorities first and foremost to come. This is politics after all. But at least in this case, it has been interesting to see the Yes on 4 campaign kind of have to adapt and really, intertwine some of those grassroots activists, within their operation, very intimately, in a way that at least previously had not been the case, from my understanding.
And so go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, so what about the rest of the?
Yeah. So to get to the opposition side of things. So shortly after we had reported that, I'd reported that Bay Staters not only had taken the $35K from the PAC, but it also, not long after started, criticizing them despite having had input on the measure as it's written. I was leaked another series of emails that are available to view through TJM that Bay Staters had sent to the Assistant Attorney General offering to schedule a meeting with representatives from the Foundation for Drug Policy Solutions and Smart Approaches for Marijuana in regards to a newly formed opposition coalition. So for those who aren't familiar with FDPS or SAM, Kevin Sabet is the longtime drug policy czar, and one, might say, staunch prohibitionist of sorts, who is the founder and one of the leaders of both the Foundation for Drug Policy Solutions and Smart Approaches to Marijuana. And very quietly last year, they started taking meetings and forming kind of behind the scenes to mount, an opposition campaign. And not long after, we'd reported that James had been collaborating with them and Bay Staters had been collaborating with them. They went public in the Boston Herald announcing, here and we're working with, and bragged about working with this formerly, pro legalization, pro statewide, legislation, grassroots organization. So fast forward a few weeks after that, and I'm contacted by a U.S. Navy veteran from Cambridge, who's one of the co-founders of a now defunct veterans group called New England Veterans for Plant Medicine, who provides me with a series of emails that Bay Staters for Natural Medicine founder James Davis had purportedly, and we later fact-checked and confirmed this, been sending, pretending to be one of the former founders of New England Veterans for Plant Medicine, a U.S. Marine veteran named Mike Botello, who formerly lived in Carlisle. So I would encourage folks to go, read, the full scope. It's a very long article, but this article that's on the screen is, part of the reaction that the community came out with afterwards. But basically, to summarize the Stolen Valor story in just a few sentences, over the course of 9 months, we'd found, over a dozen instances where Bay Staters founder James Davis had been sending emails without the explicit permission of Mike Botello, writing in his name to journalists, to other advocates, declining speaking engagements on Mike's behalf without his knowledge. And it's worth noting that at one point when they were working together, they did have an agreement where James could draft things, but that Mike would have final approval. But in December of 2023, December of last year, Mike Botello moved to South Carolina, moved his mother and his son down there. His son's pursuing a professional golf career. So made James very aware of that. And yet for a series of months after, including in official written testimony to a joint committee, here, at the State House, corresponded pretending as if he was Mike and referencing Mike's former Carlisle address as current and pretending essentially to be this individual, criticizing media members' coverage of the hearings for not, voicing veterans, concerns as if he were Mike Botello, and then making a false accusation against Yes on 4 grassroots campaign director Emily Onisjuk, who's a U.S. Navy veteran who served for 5 years, was a bomb diffusion officer. I can't remember the exact term, but was also the first ever Navy female SEAL applicant, and claimed in multiple emails to media members pretending to be Botello that the Yes on 4 campaign was committing stolen valor themselves because Onisjuk had only served in the military for less than a year before dropping out. Again, verifiably false accusation. So in a rigorous fact-checking process alongside Ferrone, as well as in tandem with DoubleBlind Magazine, who ended up picking up the story as well, we confirmed that not only did Mike have zero knowledge that any of this was happening, but James was well aware that he did not have Mike's permission to write these emails in his name, and that he was corresponding and breaking multiple laws by submitting written testimony in Botello's name as if he were a present resident of Massachusetts 4 months after he'd moved out of state entirely.
Wow, you really exposed this. This is unbelievable. So for people who just aren't aware kind of what's going on here, we're talking about a political campaign, ballot initiatives, people that all want to decriminalize, supposedly, psychedelics. The leader of the most grassroots organization ends up taking money from the opponents. he basically, turns on everything he supposedly, organized for the money, and then gets caught up in the stolen valor stuff, and just a lot of shadiness, unfortunately, sometimes in politics and movements and activism. And this is what it looks like. And you did good work on this, Jack.
Thank you.
Some questions that came in about psychedelics for our audience. Someone said they wanted to hear if psychedelics can help with PTSD.
Yeah, so I will preface everything that I'm about to say with both I am not a medical professional, nor am I a scientific expert by any means.
And I'll
But
highlight that too. I am not a medical professional either. I'm not giving any advice here.
yeah,
But there's always anecdotal, right?
there is a growing amount of emerging research that I think, especially when you look at leading researchers in other countries, one of the fun facts I like to throw around is that there's, I think, 61 doctors in Switzerland right now that are prescribing psilocybin and LSD to ADHD and autistic individuals, including some teenagers. Um, as far as the PTSD goes, there is a lot of emerging evidence that a number of different psychedelic compounds and drugs can be, and substances can be incredibly beneficial in therapeutic and non-therapeutic settings, depending on how you define that, in treating or allowing individuals to heal themselves or process aspects of their trauma in a way that leads to more prolonged and sustained improvements in overall mental health than conventional pharmaceutical options currently on the market and FDA approved. So I can get into a lot of that stuff as well. I mean, it's really interesting, specifically when you talk about psilocybin, the things that it's really useful for. There's a fascinating organization called the Cluster Busters that are really, they're behind a lot of the advocacy that you see on the federal level for psilocybin, but they're specifically advocating for decriminalizing psilocybin because it's incredibly effective for treating severe migraines and cluster headaches.
Mm.
So you think about somebody who's having a cluster headache or a migraine isn't taking, like, they might take a large quantity or a large dose of psilocybin mushrooms, but they're not doing it for, the hallucinogenic experience. They're doing it to immediately alleviate pain in a way that non-conventional pharmaceutical options, just can't do for them. And the neuroinflammation and autoimmune disorder research that's emerging. I've spoken with folks in Colorado who use low dose psilocybin, not what you would call a microdose, but not what you would call a hallucinogenic dose either, to treat severe, like, treatment resistant fibromyalgia and osteoarthritis. So even beyond just the PTSD and some of the depression, treatment resistant depression that we see really being advocated for in like a standard Western medicine paradigm, there's a lot of really other interesting emerging research into what some of these can be beneficial for. We talked about Ibogaine a little bit for the substance abuse, but that's really only scratching the surface on what some of these compounds could do. I also think it's worth noting that, like, the spores for psilocybin mushrooms are federally legal. You can order them on the internet. It's once they're grown, once they are bloomed or above ground, so to speak, that's when they become federally illegal, because then they have the psilocybin in the actual substance. One other thing I want to point out about the ballot measure really quickly before I forget is that it's, in terms of the personal possession limits, if you go and you read it, it says 1 gram of pure psilocybin. One of the things that some of the opponents of this measure have tried to say is that that's a very literal 1 gram of pure psilocybin is the same thing as 1 gram of dried mushrooms. That's not true. 1 gram of pure psilocybin is very broad in terms of the strength and quantity, but for context, like, a rough calculation is anywhere between like 56 to 133 grams of dried mushrooms can contain roughly 1 gram of pure. So the personal possession limits, both to have in your pocket in public and to be able to cultivate at home, are pretty broad. Again, I think that there's a lot of evidence that decriminalization doesn't lead to increased public health harms. So I'm for it personally. I think that the decrim aspect and the home grow aspect is just no longer criminalizing something that's already
That's
existing.
what I'm saying. Like I don't use any of this stuff. Hopefully I
Yeah.
never need to have it for PTSD. I had a little PTSD this year, but I think I can handle it without it. But just you know, I just don't want people arrested. I know how it ruins lives. It basically ruined my life for the weed I got busted. Like not my life, but quite a few years. It was a major economic hit for me and career wise, just because I got arrested with a little bit of weed back in the day before it was legal. Now it's nothing. It's just like, and what's the difference? You know, it's and I think the thing is too, the difference is that we brought in doctors into it, which is very helpful on all this stuff. Like
Yeah.
because there are risks. I think, you know, with any drug, there are adverse reactions. There are people, am I correct on this? People have flipped out on acid or mushrooms even. And, but it's not like everybody does. Most people don't. And if you have, you know, if you're allergic to peanut butter, you stay away from peanuts. It's just, it's the
Yeah.
way of the world. We don't ban peanuts because some people have an allergy that could kill them, you know, and I know it sucks for the people that have peanut allergies, but that's just a reality because peanut butter is so good for people. You know what I mean? Like there's so
Yeah.
many good uses for these things. So I
And
just think that's what it is. Am I right on that?
and I think I think one of the really interesting things about psilocybin in particular, and I can't remember the exact word, I'm going to butcher it, but there's a specific uh, chemical property of it that your brain's tolerance or um, like the efficacy of it over time decreases with each use. Um, and so it is not an addictive substance in a way that other, drugs might be. And it's also specifically with psilocybin, it has a lower risk profile. And this is leading scientific research. I would encourage folks to look into this, and do your own research. But it has a lower risk profile than uh, you know most drugs. It's a fascinating substance in general for a lot of the different things that it can do that I mentioned, but by and large, yes, there are, of course, negative experiences and in instances of folks, suffering from episodes of psychosis. But I think, to that point, decriminalizing this and allowing for individuals to have conversations with their medical providers about what responsible and informed use looks like, and destigmatizing the fact that this stuff is already out there, but people can be more informed and use these things more responsibly, safe setting, lower doses. One of the
Well,
most
as I always
fascinating.
say, go slow. Like when
Yeah.
people hit me up about cannabis, like I got hit up for a lot of older women who are like great grandmas, grandmas, and they're going into the dispensary. They're all nervous. This happens a lot. I get these
Yeah.
questions now, and I just say, go slow. You know, just take it slow. That's it, right? Like, see what you works for you, right? And go slow. Like, don't go crazy the first time. You know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. One of the most interesting conversations that I have often with kind of the boomer crowd when I'm at some of the event, like some of the grassroots events that I'm at, is those that aren't, those that really don't know that much aren't really aware that there's something in between the hallucinogenic dose and the microdose. And a lot of folks really don't understand that a microdose is intended to be subperceptual. You're not supposed to feel like you're on anything on a microdose. You're supposed to notice maybe over time that you've seen some improvements. And I think there's various ways of measuring that. And I think really scientifically, if there's one thing the jury is still out on when it comes to psilocybin, it's microdosing. There's just not enough evidence yet. If anything, it's probably the least convincing argument that microdosing psilocybin in particular is as effective as antidepressants. But
Yeah, and that's the thing. You may not get anything if
yeah,
you don't take enough. You may not get enough. But I think
but
that's the key, though. That's okay the first
yeah,
time. You just gotta figure out what enough is for you. You know, I think
yeah.
that's the key for this stuff.
So the idea of like the term that folks in the psychedelic community use is kind of like the meza or the museum dose. Obviously, it depends on your tolerance. I'm not going to get into my own use by any means for, out of respect for my mother, but yeah, just
You're are you a mama's boy? It seems like it now. I'm hearing the mama's boy. I
I
love it.
I'm one of four brothers. I doubt that she is watching live, but out of respect for her, I'm not. I'm not going to go there at this time.
That's very nice of you. You're a good son.
I try. I was a bit of a wild child back in the day, so I'm sure she'll be glad to hear that was said live on the air and everything.
And we never even got into it because, I like to get right into the topic at hand. Tell us about yourself and your background, where you're from, how you get into this.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting story. So I moved to Boston. I'm originally from Richmond, Virginia, born and raised. Moved around a little bit in high. I went to a bunch of different high schools, and that's a story for another less sober time. But the the impetus to move to Boston came after a rough stretch of my life. Without getting into the details, I ended up briefly homeless in New Orleans. I tried to kind of start my life over and moved down there in 2019. Found my way back to Richmond to kind of reboot my life, and was introduced to the idea of an AmeriCorps program. For those who aren't familiar, it's kind of like the stateside Peace Corps, if you will.
Yeah, public service
Exactly.
program that the feds
So,
run, right? The federal
yeah,
government basically runs it.
woefully underfunded. I'll give the Biden administration credit for at least proposing the idea of expanding it, because, like,
I
for
would
me,
love to see
it
that.
changed my
That's the
life.
Bill Clinton thing. And
Yeah,
before that, there was a program in Massachusetts that Mike Dukakis had going. That's
it's
kind of like
still
the
exists.
idea
The
for it.
Commonwealth Corps. The
And I know
Commonwealth
it
Corps
helped
still
kids.
exists.
I know
Yeah,
it, especially back in the day when there were no jobs. There was economic times when there was like kids couldn't get summer jobs, so they'd do I forgot what they call it, city fund or city
well,
way,
there's
something
City
like that.
Year.
Yeah,
City
city
Year
year.
is one of them. That was a federal program, but Massachusetts actually has the Commonwealth Corps, which is
Yeah.
a state funded program, and some of those are actually much better than the first one that I was in, which was, it's not great. It was a
So
nonprofit.
would you did this what is it called, AmeriCorps?
AmeriCorps.
Where
Yeah,
were
so I
you? Where did you do it out of? What kind of work were you doing for AmeriCorps?
Yeah, so I moved to Boston. I have no conception of Boston before the pandemic, because I moved here on June 17th, 2020, to an apartment over in Dorchester, and I worked at two charter schools in the Roxbury area, 3rd through 10th grade as a glorified teaching assistant. Definitely I made like $1,000 in a stipend, and 950 of it went to rent. But it got me out of my hometown, and I really needed to get the hell out of my hometown. And I put in the time, and was referred to a second program partnered with Northeastern for a brief callback. Like, I originally went off to college. I was a football player. I played I was on the roster at Coastal Carolina University many moons ago. I was a left tackle, and ended up dropping out of college 2 separate
So
times.
what was your height and weight as a left tackle for this college?
Yeah, so I grew like an inch and a half my freshman year, but I was like 6'3.5", and like at the time like 285.
All right. So you
Was
must
like
have been a beast in that league, maybe.
I
You're
was
like,
not.
no?
I was not. I got there on like the first day, and within like 3 days, I knew I played at a small high school. My coach had some great connections, and I was a good high school football player, but no Uncle Rico type by any means. You have
It's
to
hard.
really,
It gets harder too in college. It's
well,
because you got so
everybody,
many distractions. You got all girls and beers and parties every night of the week. Like,
you
and
know,
the educational opportunities too. There's so much going on.
it was a full-time job, 70 hours a week on football, and then like 50, like 30 to 40 on class. And
Yeah.
I'm ADHD as it gets, and just admittedly could not handle both. And
Oh, it's brutal.
I got my thoughts on kids shouldn't necessarily always go to college right at 18. I won't get into that. But to get back to very quickly the AmeriCorps stuff, to answer your original question, I parlayed the first year into a second year with a program called the Massachusetts Promise Fellowship, partnered with Northeastern University, kind of backdoored my way in there, and worked with a small nonprofit up in Lynn called La Vida Scholars. Very much recommend anybody who's feeling generous this holiday season, give a few bucks to La Vida. They're good people. But I worked with low-income honor students, public school students, had immigrant students, had a couple of
What's the name of
undocumented.
it? Can we look it up? I mean, one of the things before I let you go tonight, I want like we have people watching, and we like to put links. What's the name of that group?
La
You
Vida
said?
Scholars. La Vida, LAVIDA Scholars. Really great organization. And I was really fortunate to be able to work with them. And, we did some college advising, led college tours of Tufts and Harvard and UMass Amherst. And I helped kids write their essays. But we also got to teach, not to, we got to teach these really cool social justice workshops, which really I wanted to be a journalist since I was 12 years old. I was one of those kids that read like polling data in 2008 between Romney and McCain, and wrote letters to my I was a huge nerd, but got to teach these kids these, workshops comparing police training in, Massachusetts versus medical, mental health intervention programs that were out in Oregon, and healthcare in the US and abroad. It was really cool, but it got me kind of tapped back into this kind of work. And really wanting to, take the complex and put it into layman's terms and disseminate the powers that be and the power structures behind some of the things that we know to be normal or baked into our worlds, what's actually driving them. So after that year, I spent some time in the nonprofit sector. Did not take, as ADHD as it gets, and my brain does not fit into the corporate paradigm. So went back to school, and as a result, got connected to Ferrone. And Chris and Jason Promise, co-founder of the Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism, had read some stuff that I'd written over the summer about education policy, and needed somebody to join their new Horizon Mass, which is like a statewide student-run news outlet. One thing led to another, and in my first meeting, Ferrone needed somebody to cover psychedelics events. So I came into this wanting to cover education issues and had interest in psychedelics and cannabis industry, and subscribed to Talking Joints Memo when I first moved up here for, almost 5 years ago. But definitely did not have, or could not have envisioned myself going from just getting started on the front lines with this, grassroots org to, kind of at the forefront of really, for folks, take it to a national scale. What happens with question 4 will determine the course, at least in my estimation, and the folks that I've spoken to, determine the course of psychedelic decriminalization efforts on a statewide level for the rest of this movement. I think that if it doesn't pass, I anticipate that it will, and I can talk about the polling here in a second. But if it doesn't pass, I don't think that a robust statewide psychedelic decriminalization measure will have much weight behind it in states nearby. I think that if it does pass, then we're looking at a potential domino effect, because to your point, Massachusetts has been kind of this tastemaker for some of these progressive policy leaps to the national level or to other states. And you take into account, obviously, all of our biotech, and, Harvard and academia, and the research that's already being done here. And it would be really a stepping stone to further legitimize statewide reform efforts that I think Massachusetts voters could end up being very proud of. I don't think it's a perfect bill. I think it's probably going to be worked around a little bit by the legislature, and that could be a good thing, that could be a bad thing. But I think to be the state that takes this movement to the next level would be pretty cool. And I'm really kind of honored to be able to cover it. Yeah.
And what is the polling? What is the polling showing on this ballot initiative?
It's tight. It's real tight. A Boston Globe poll that came out a few days before the Globe actually came out against it was indicating 46.5 yes to 46 no, with 7.5% roughly of voters still undecided. A couple days later, a UMass Amherst poll indicated 43 even split yes no, with 14% undecided. So I think there's a large swath of voters, polling over the summer from UNH indicated that this is the ballot question people knew the least about, and most, 40% of people polled or something like that in the UNH survey over the summer didn't even know that there was a psychedelic ballot initiative on the ballot this fall. So they've played a lot of catch up at getting the word out. And it's worth noting that Colorado, which I think, we all could argue in its own way, has a pretty uniquely diverse electorate. Some of the Lauren Boebert, gun-toting, libertarian, Republican crowd mixed in with, the really progressive, Denver obviously led the way on cannabis, et cetera. But a week before they passed their bill, the Natural Medicine Health Act, which is what ours was modeled off of, it was trailing by 2% in the polls. And a week later, it won by 8%. So if somewhere between that 7 to 14% undecided is still relatively undecided in the next few weeks, not in the next 2 weeks, going into next week, I would be shocked if 7 to 8% at least of that potentially 14% up to grabs didn't vote yes. I would imagine 8 to 9% of that 14% undecided would vote yes. That's my guess. I think you look at historic first-time voter turnout with the youth vote is probably going to be the driver of this progressive anti-establishment.
With those numbers, I would expect it to pass because I remember what the numbers were for cannabis, and it passed easily. I just feel like, for people on the edge, those undecided people, do you want your son or daughter arrested for something like this that helps them? I mean, that's what this is about for me, is like to see no one lose jobs or lose careers over something that might help them. Like, you know what I mean? So nobody should be arrested for this shit. It just doesn't make sense especially this stuff. This stuff is like, it's not the other stuff, it's not even close. This stuff can help people. It seems like I'm not a scientist or a doctor, but there's enough there that doctors now. So
yeah, just this morning I was at a press conference down at the State House steps with Dr. Franklin King, who's the director of education and training for MGH's Neuroscience Psychedelic Research Center. There's a lot of enthusiasm in the medical community as to what this could open up, as far as treatment options. And I saw a little comment on there about, concerns about for-profit service centers. And I think that those concerns are founded to a degree. I don't think the decrim will be the impetus for that. I think that the legislature has an opportunity to kind of weave this stuff, these services, into existing healthcare structures. I know there's, a Cambridge Biotherapies is the CTO of which is one of the founders of Decrim, Massachusetts. They are very keen. They offer ketamine, therapy services, which are also not covered by insurance. But to be able to offer psilocybin or psychedelic-assisted therapies as a treatment option, right? Like, there's stuff like transcranial magnetic stimulation therapy that you have to have tried 4 SSRIs or 4 pharmaceutical options before you're eligible for it. The idea that we can't weave in some of these options into our existing healthcare system, especially given that we've now seen with a few years in Oregon that the standalone service center model isn't very profitable. The real racket is the very high cost training and certification programs that have cropped up out there. There are more of those operating in Oregon than there are service centers right now. But again, like, this bill is not based on the Oregon bill. It's based on the Colorado bill, which the legislature did some things to it that make it a little bit more expensive. It's like $53,000 to get your license in Colorado. Not very cheap. But the Massachusetts state legislature had already proposed a very interesting bill written by Representative Nick Baldiga, who is the self-described most conservative politician in Massachusetts, notably, but that proposed a pretty affordable licensing and regulatory structure that I think could be woven into this post-passage, just to ease everybody's minds. I don't know if it'll happen, but it's like $150 registration fee with $150 renewal fee biannually. If there's good faith operators, legacy market providers that have certifications from programs that exist out west, or we can offer some 1-year certification programs through BU, through Harvard Extension School. There's already one of those at University of Wisconsin-Madison for some of these folks. There's already stuff like that in Colorado. We can copy and paste that stuff and make it a little bit more affordable and easy to access. And I think we can avoid, or at least mitigate, this stuff's going to be expensive because it's not covered by insurance. I think one of the statistics that I learned recently is that, like, the same amount of time, because if you think about, this is a six-hour experience, a psychedelic trip, depending on what substance you're on, but then there's intake hours before, et cetera. And so the billing without insurance comes out to a couple $1,000, which I myself could not afford, nor would I pay for. But comparably, the same amount of time hours billable to your average cost of a social worker in the state of Massachusetts comes out to like $800, $900 for a 6-hour period of sessions.
Medical care is always expensive. So, it's labor intensive too.
Yeah. And we, but by taking a step forward now and also having an electorate that's more informed about this issue than most in the electorates before it, 8 cities across the state Their city councilors have determined that there are not these increased risks to deprioritizing law enforcement of it. They're willing to take that step. They see the evidence. It is a really unique opportunity, and I'm not making the prediction it'll happen because we have the least effective legislature in the country on a state level. They do not do very much. But this is a legislature that's proposed 8 different pieces of psychedelic-related legislation before, none of which got very much steam because they don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. They want the voters to have to decide. That's why it ended up being a ballot initiative. But because there has been that interest, there could be some very interesting wheeling and dealing post-passage that isn't all clawbacks or cutbacks. And I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not well informed enough with the ins and outs of sources in the legislature to say if that's viable. But I think it's at least worth noting that the Massachusetts electorate has a luxury that Oregon and Colorado voters did not have before them. We see what hasn't worked there. We see the red flags in the implementation process in Colorado. And more than ever, this is a legislature that at least will listen to the electorate about some of the science surrounding it. If they didn't, 8 cities wouldn't have deprioritized this stuff across the state. So I think that there are some serious concerns just based on what we've seen in Oregon and Colorado for smaller providers. But just being aware of that gives Massachusetts activists a leg up in the post-passage.
Excellent. Jack Gorsline. You can find your work, Talking Joints Memo, and what's this other one? The one that just came out? It's the national DoubleBlind.
DoubleBlind Magazine, longtime psychedelic magazine, focused both on culture and some of the comings and goings, news-wise and politically. Also featured in Filter Magazine, longtime harm reduction, drug policy news magazine. And got some good stuff in the works with some other outlets in the near future. So
how can people support you? People watching today. Is there any way that people can support you? You have social media?
Yeah. So I'm working on getting a Patreon going, hopefully. But you can find me. I'm pretty easy to find on Instagram and LinkedIn. Folks in the industry want to add me on LinkedIn, but Instagram and Twitter. X, I kind of refuse to call it X, to be honest. I'm just not going to go there. But yeah, Jack Gorsline, Jack.Gorsline, some variation of that. Pretty easy to find me.
I'm going to post it in the chat right now. If I can find it, I'm going to look for it right now. Is there anything else you want to mention or bring up that you didn't get to discuss tonight?
Yeah, just really quickly. One of the things in this article that I would encourage folks to go read, and I very much would appreciate, that has not been covered by some of the, by really any of the other national media outlets, is that the treasurer of the opposition campaign, the Coalition for Safe Communities, the No on 4 campaign, if you will, is a man named Charles Gant, who you've probably never heard of, but is a very influential person when it comes to conservative politics right now. Over the last 20 years, Charles Gant, who is based in Beverly, Massachusetts, and is the vice president of a political consulting firm called Red Curve Solutions, has been the signature guy for a wide-ranging number of conservative causes, as well as the senior financial analyst for the 2012 Romney presidential campaign. He's got a knack for large-scale donations of $500,000 or more. He's also been the treasurer of Latinas for Freedom, based in Texas. But he's also the founder of Make America Great Again, Inc. And I'm not here to litigate Trump by any means. Vote who you want to vote for. It's not my beat. I've got my thoughts. I'll keep them to myself. I know you've got, there's some Trump folks in the audience. But the connection there, and a lot of folks wondering what might Trump think of psychedelics. He might have his own thoughts, but I think it's fair to say that when you look at issues like this, especially with how he's made this turn on Amendment 3 in Florida and is very for it after taking some meetings with the CEO of TrueLeave, this is someone, when it comes to drug policy, at least, is going to go where, at least in the temporary, the money seems to be. And I apologize if that, riles up any Trump supporters out there. I'm not trying to, but I do think it's important to note that while there is, Dewey Square on the Yes on 4 side has been running Democratic presidential campaigns since the Clinton era. They're very influential, probably one of the 5 most powerful political consulting, grass tops political consulting firms on the planet. But on the other side, there's also some very powerful political powers that be, that should they come out on top, I think could potentially stymie the progress of psychedelic policy
Why?
reform.
I want to ask you, like, why is this guy with all this money? He's got this pack. Why is he involved? Like, I think he'd be focused on Trump, like trying to get Trump elected, but he's focused on opposing psychedelics. Why? Why is he spending all this money? I don't get. I always
It's
wonder about
interesting.
Kevin Sabet, like, because I used to oppose him too. Where's he? Who's funding them? Why? There is
So
something weird going on there. Why?
yeah, it's interesting, right? So like, as far as I know, Charles Gann has not been involved from an operational standpoint with anything going. He's the signature guy, he's the treasurer guy. But the reason for that being is that, what's curious is that they officially filed back in May, like right after we found out they were working with Bay Staters. They filed their paperwork with the state, but up until literally 2 weeks ago, they didn't have a single expenditure or donation listed for any of their campaign finance reports until 2 weeks ago, when they got $100,000 donation from Smart Approaches to Marijuana, which is obviously one of the groups that's propping them up.
Sam. Yeah.
But Red Curve Solutions, this is what's really interesting. Red Curve Solutions, Charles Gantz, he's the vice president of that organization, is currently, as of April, there was a complaint filed with the FEC by a nonpartisan watchdog organization called the Campaign Legal Center that alleges that Red Curve Solutions is colluding with both Make America Great Again Inc., the super PAC that's been, bankrolling Trump's campaigns, and is also, known more notoriously for the NFTs and the trading cards with pieces of his suit and whatnot. But with both the Trump Make America Great Again Inc. and 3 other Trump adjacent political action committees to obscure who's paying for and where the money is going regarding his legal fees. And in that complaint, they're alleging, there's this clear obfuscation. So the Campaign Legal Center, again, a nonpartisan watchdog organization, is saying that, they're kind of distorting or at least delaying the reporting of where some of this money is coming from in an attempt to conceal where it's really going, or, where the funding is actually coming from and going from. So it is just worth noting there's no evidence that any of that is going on with the Coalition for Safe Communities, but it is worth noting that the money man behind the operation, at least in name only, is already mixed up in some potentially shady and or federally illegal campaign finance practices.
Is it crazy to think like big pharma money might be like saying, we're worried about our patents for all these
So
psychological issues, and we don't want the psychedelics to compete with us like cannabis actually competes with them?
what's really interesting is there hasn't been a lot of evidence that pharma is really touching this. I mean,
Yeah.
on the Yes on 4 side, there were a couple of like 50K level donations from like some venture capitalists like in 2023. There were no follow-up donations in 2024, but that were VCs who worked for an organization called AliCorp, which is a venture capital fund that's kind of like the biotech guys in New York City. And they do have some seedings in some companies that are based in Massachusetts. But the decriminalization portion here is probably what would scare some of the profit-minded pharma folks a little bit more. I think there's always going to be a need in Western medicine for the white lab coat and the well-lit office. Not, I
Exactly.
joke. My dad just turned 67 and my mom's 64, and they're definitely not cannabis or psychedelics people. But if they were ever going to be, they're not going to go to a guy named Kevin who's a shaman and grows this stuff in
Right.
his
I think
garage.
it expands the portfolio for Western medicine. They just like take it in, like,
Yeah, so like
yeah,
I really don't think it, and it's also like it's much easier to grow and to cultivate some of these mushrooms than it is even to like maintain and prune and keep a cannabis plant alive even for one cycle. So the idea that this really isn't a fully corporatizable thing, especially with a robust legacy market that's no longer facing criminal prosecution, my hope would be that the decrim market really that already exists, these legacy market providers. I know a guy in Methuen who does referrals for an ibogaine clinic in Mexico. I know, mushroom farmers that, have the spores and grow their own stuff and sell it out of the back room all across the state. There's retreats going on, ayahuasca up in New Hampshire. There's churches in Weymouth. There's people that are already doing
doing
this
this.
stuff.
Of course.
And the idea that decriminalization would lead to this flooding of bad actors, I
Yeah,
really
no.
don't think is very.
We're just the key is make it less risky. Like that's
Yeah,
it. Like legalize it. Especially the decrim, no arrest. I want to
and my
thank you so much for coming on today, Jack Gorsline. This has been very enlightening to find out what's going on with this initiative, what it would mean, about the money that's being thrown around, kind of the dirty tricks about it, and I enjoy your coverage. And
yeah,
we put your Twitter in the chat so people can follow Jack on Twitter. Definitely.
awesome. Yeah,
Excellent.
thank you, sir. Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Have a
And
great night.
keep us updated. Let us know if there's anything, especially anything scandalous. We like scandals,
Yeah,
corruption.
yeah, no, the one that I'll drop right now is that as of the latest, state records, Bay Staters is non-compliant with their state taxes, and could be operating as an illegal charity right now, which is an interesting one in itself. But stay tuned on that, and I'll get out of your hair for now. Thanks again, Mike.
Thank you so much, Jack. Have a good night.
Yes, sir. Take care. Bye.
That was Jack Gorsline. He's a reporter, investigative reporter. He's covered the psychedelic beat. We talked about this ballot question that people are voting on in Massachusetts, early voting right now, to change laws to stop arresting people for this stuff. I don't use this stuff. I used it when I was a kid, but a couple times. But I don't use it. But I don't think anyone, especially like someone who's had really horrible stuff happen to them, and they could get some help through a doctor. They should be arrested for it. Freedom, especially for adults. So I'm going to vote yes for this. I am. And I like Jack tonight because he exposes what's actually going on with the campaign, because there's been some shadiness going on. This guy got paid off. He basically changed his tune and took the money, and that he did stolen valor. So I like that Jack broke some stories. Boston Institute nonprofit journalist Chris Ferrone, he does great things. I like Jack. That was a good, definitely a good segment. Have him back on the show. Oh, you know what I'm going to do right now? Hold on one second. First, I'm going to cough. Yeah, first I'm going to hit the mute button and then cough, get a drink of water, and come back. Here I am. What am I doing? I'm going to remove that. I know what I want to do. I got to play something. You got to wait for this. Before we take I'm going to take a few phone calls. Nah, actually, I don't have it. Damn it. Well, we'll get to that another time. I'm not logged into Twitter. Twitter sucks now. Twitter really sucks now that when you're not logged into it, it's... For some reason, I'm not logged in right now. I don't want to F with that. All right. So instead, you know what time it is. I already see my phone ringing. People already know the number. I haven't even put it up on the screen yet. All right. If you're going to call in tonight, let me make sure the phone line's set up. No, it's not. I don't even think it's set up yet. Nope. People are already calling. Give me a minute, folks. But what I want to hear, what do you think about this Vanity Fair story and some of the info coming out, like that the Vanity Fair reporter consulted with a tech expert that concluded that the 227 search did indeed happen? What do you think about the reporting in this Vanity Fair? A lot of new bombshells. And also, what do you think about the facts that we were talking about on my show earlier today about Sean McDonough, Turtle Boy, and Karen Reed? That's what I want to hear tonight when you call in. So, and any comments on that Vanity Fair story? Because I think it was very revealing. Still getting the system How long's my mic been muted, by the way? Crazy. Can't hear me. I was having some technical issues. My system crashed, and my StreamYard crashed earlier, and then it muted me on the StreamYard, not even my system that I usually have problems with. I'm still muted. How the hell am I still muted? I'm not muted right now, right? I'm Hi, caller. You're on the air, I think. Hi, who's calling?
Hi, my name's.
Hi, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Who's calling?
My I can.
Bad connection. I don't know what's going on right now. Everything's going crazy. I'm gonna try another call. Maybe he's got a bad connection, but Jesus, my system crashed. It muted me. But I think we're gonna be good. Hold on, let's see if this call is any better. Hi, who's calling?
I think we're going to be good. Hello?
Hi.
Hello?
Turn down your system. We can hear you in the background. We can hear you streaming. Please turn it off.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my name is Jim Coffey. I'm actually calling from Mexico City.
Jim from Mexico City. What do you got? Go ahead.
I grew up in Westwood with Dave Tree
Awesome.
off Canton Street. I had seen your article with him, or your interview with him, and I wanted to make 2 points that have been driving me crazy. There's a little delay here between the video and the call. I've got it muted anyway, but just if it seems like we talk over each other, it's probably because I'm coming from Mexico City. But everybody focuses on, did she say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him? And it's irrelevant whether she said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, or did I hit him? Did I hit him? Her brain was making the connection. She goes home drunk, doesn't answer the calls. She shows up at the scene and they see the body there. Everyone's going to be like, oh my God, maybe I hit him. That's not a confession. It was never a confession. And it drives me crazy that people think that, because if it was, she would have gone up to a cop at the scene and been like, look, I hit him. I was out of control last night. That didn't happen. It's just the brain filling in the gaps and then like an excited utterance of that fact. And I don't think the defense does a good enough job of explaining that that's not a confession, even if she says, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. And then the second part that's driving me crazy is she cannot get a fair trial. It was a she said, they said. She said he went into the house. They said he never did. And the cops never bothered to investigate. At that point, to me, there is no case. They didn't do their job, and she can't ever prove he went in the house because they didn't search it. And it just drives me crazy that all these people want to send her away for life when the investigation was that shoddy. That's what's just been driving me crazy about this case. Mainly that no one points out, I hit him, even if she said it exactly like that, still wasn't a confession.
Exactly. Guys, good point, Jim. What did you read the Vanity Fair article?
I did. I just finished reading it.
What do you think about it?
I thought it was really well done and starts to at least explain more to your average person who hasn't been following the trial. The reason I follow it is I grew up 4 miles away on Canton Street, and I happened to find your videos separate from finding out you knew Dave Tree. I was a couple years behind him, but we went to Lollapalooza together. We went to the Dead together, and I was blown away when I saw him on your program. I was like, hey, I've been following this guy independently, and it turns out he knows Dave Tree. I think you guys work together.
We used to do some cannabis activism actually and other causes. Like, we're both activists. We created like a battle of band to play the Freedom Rally. We've done a bunch of fundraising, things like that. He's a musician, and I used to book shows, so sometimes we'd come across each other. And my girlfriend also put his music on WAAF. So, you know, there's a lot of different relationships there and friendship.
Oh, yeah. I used to have the T-shirt when I was a kid. If you're not cranking it, you're yanking it.
Yeah, and I love Tree.
WAAF.
And I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Tree. I mean, it's funny because he's my friend. You know, I love Dave, and he's like a collaborator. He's someone that supports me. I support him, and it's just like brotherhood. I love everything about Dave Tree. He supports so many people too.
I came home in August for like 6 weeks. I hadn't been home in a couple of years, and I went and saw him when he played. God, I forget what it's called. It's an outdoor show at the old mental hospital somewhere.
I don't know where that one was, but he plays everywhere. He's just he's
Oh,
prolific.
it was awesome.
Yeah. Was that recent?
Yeah, he's great.
Was that recently or like
Yeah. I was home in September. Yeah, in September he played like around the 20th or 21st at the old mental hospital in
Norwood?
I forget which town it is.
You know,
Yeah, it was a really cool place.
Because what you got on me, Jim, you realize with Dave right now is that you've been to a show recently and I haven't. I haven't gone to see a Tree show. So if Dave and I talk or you bring up my Dave, he's going to be like, fuck Mike. He doesn't come to my shows enough. Like, it's true. I'm getting old. I don't go out anymore. They're saying, is it Bridgewater, Danvers? I don't know. Danvers doesn't do shows. Danvers State Hospital, they got apartments up there now. I don't know. We don't know what people want to know what hospital it was, Jim.
I'm trying to remember. It was like either Stoughton or it's not. I grew up in Westwood. It wasn't that far of a ride.
Definitely wasn't the Bridgewater.
And I was
one.
hoping. No, it wasn't Bridgewater.
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping I would see you there so I could just make that one point about I hit him.
You made
even
it
if
tonight.
she said it isn't a confession.
Yeah, you made it tonight,
What?
Jim. You got it out there tonight. You certainly did.
Yeah, I just want the defense to start making that point. Like, hey, you guys are harping on this as like the be all end all. And people don't realize how much your brain fills in the gaps. That's why optical illusions work.
Yeah. It's how
Like,
especially with
she
trauma. Trauma.
Yeah, she shows up, is like, oh my God, I must have hit him. I hit him. He's lying where I left him. Maybe he never made it in the house. When I backed up, I didn't see him. And if the evidence had coincided with that, you could take it at, maybe she's remembering something. But as soon as the ARCA guys got involved, that just goes out the window. Like, you have to be a complete dumbass to think the feds hired experts to prove it never happened just out of the blue because they wanted to get a cop killer off.
Yeah.
Blows my mind.
Excellent. I want to thank you for calling
Well, all right.
watching, calling in. And,
Yeah, I don't want to.
I love that you shouted out my boy Dave Tree tonight, too.
Yeah. No, I was blown away because I'd been following your videos for a little bit. And I was like, all of a sudden I saw you were going to be with Dave Tree. And I'm like, no way. Yeah, it was awesome. So keep up the good work, man.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, Jim. Mexico
All right, you too.
City in the
Bye.
house. I love it. That's Mexico City calling in. 978-560-3155. This is your opportunity. Everything's working right now. And it's not like 2,000 people watching. So you get a good chance to get right through right now. There's only like 636 on. There we go. Hi, we're live. Who's calling?
Hello.
Hi, you're live on the show. Who's calling?
Hi. My name is Mike. I was listening to the debate with the psychedelics journalist.
I'm sorry. Say that again. You're Mike. You're what?
So my name is Mike, and I was listening to you talk to the psychedelics journalist.
Oh, Jack. Yes. What? Do you have some comments on that?
Yeah, I do. So I actually I work in healthcare. I'm a paramedic, and I've got a decent amount of experience with the out of hospital like psychiatric population. And I want to like be very, very clear about this. I'm completely in favor of legalization and all the good things that brings. But I think it's very interesting that the American Psychiatric Association actually comes out against this bill. And that the reason that they're not in favor of it is because there is a section of the psychiatric populations that essentially when hit from this stuff and they can become manic or psychotic, et cetera. And there's a big fear that not in a way that it was thought that marijuana would do this, but that this is going to lead to a very big increase in both juvenile and chronically unhealthy psychiatric populations.
What's your name again?
Mike.
Mike. And where are you calling from?
Calling from Woburn.
Woburn, okay. So you're not part of the SAM program or anything like that. You're not part of the opposition. You're just a person that watches the show. Have you watched my show before? How did you find out about us tonight?
To be completely honest, I was trying to look for local live content. I found you.
Okay, cool. All right. I mean, I definitely, I know that it could definitely affect some people, but I don't see how it increases the likelihood though. Like, cause I think if people are using this, they're using it. You know what I mean?
No, I completely know what you mean. A lot of the condition-induced from substances tends to be opportunity based. It's not necessarily the same with someone who's addicted to, like, say, something that's a little bit harder, like heroin or crack or something like that.
Exactly.
But I mean, how many people can you think of that, chronically trip on shrooms or LSD? I can't think of any.
Not many.
Yeah. But that with a wider circulation of this kind of stuff, and
do you think it will, though?
A greater availability?
Yeah. Do you think it will, though? I mean, I think if people want this, especially like the mushrooms, I could get the mushrooms. I know I could. I don't want them. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. I just don't. I don't buy that one. I mean, it's one thing if it was sold on like the Super Bowl, like beer is like it's not happening. Yeah. It's not happening. I appreciate your call. I thank you for calling, Mike from Woburn. Please watch and call again. All right, we're the Young Jurks. He got to say his piece. I said mine. That's good. I want to move on though, because I want to talk about the Karen Reed stuff. And that was a good call. I appreciate your call, Mike, because I think there are some people who definitely could be affected by that stuff. People have these adverse reactions, like anything else, though. I don't want to lock people up because some people are allergic to peanuts. Let's take this one. Hi, it's the Young Jurks. Who's calling tonight? You got to turn down. You got to turn down what you're listening on. Hi, we can hear the stream on the background. Can you turn that down?
Okay, I'm going to turn it down.
Thank you.
Hi,
who's calling? What's your name?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. And then they hung up. Please, folks, if you call in tonight, turn it down. You can't be watching the stream and calling in. You gotta turn down the volume before you call in, or just turn it off. I'm gonna try to take one more call, maybe a couple more. We'll see. 978-560-3155. There aren't that many people watching right now, so maybe we won't get that many calls. You know what I want to do? I want to definitely make sure I hit the Venmo and the Cash App and all the other people who have been supporting us. We'll take this call. Hi, who's calling?
This is Angela.
Angela.
I just called. I'm sorry. I didn't expect to get through the first time. So I didn't have it turned down.
Yeah, you did this time. There are not as many people watching tonight.
Oh, wow. Unbelievable.
It happens, it's the topic, and I think, I let off all my steam this afternoon. Everyone was into that one.
Yeah, I didn't see that, unfortunately. I've been following this case when I first started. I just came into it. I just saw a clip on TV and I saw the dog bites on the arm, and I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. What's going on here? My big thing is I think people don't focus on is the belt. They said John's belt was missing, and then it appeared, and talking about the ambulance. My big thing is, and I don't think anyone's focused on, is if they cut off his clothes, they would have cut the belt, and that looked like a brand new belt to me. That does it for me, besides the dog bites.
And what do you think about, did you read the Vanity Fair article that came out today?
I've only seen part of it. I'm trying to keep up with everything because today I've been watching the Sean videos and the things that he said, and I'm disappointed because I just feel like I'm just confused about it. Really confused about it.
I wouldn't get too upset. That's my advice. These things happen and movements, and people have to sometimes sort out their differences, and it doesn't mean,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it doesn't sway my opinion on anything. It's just all confusing, and, the other side making fights with people and doing things and, threatening and all of that. None of it makes sense to me. And, I think he's going through some stuff and a little emotional, and, I think that he's had accusations thrown at him, and he's like, please, somebody back me up here. And so I get it. I just don't think that it does well for the people that don't have common sense to see it for what it is. But yeah,
but in a way, almost those people almost don't matter. I'll put that out there too, in a way. But I think I hear what you're saying. I think that I think the most important thing to take out of this is that Sean's very confident in Karen's innocence.
Yes, I did. I do know that. I know that he's confident in that. I just hope that other people see that as well. Even though he's having a moment, and that's all it is. But even in his moment, he still knows that she's not guilty.
Exactly. Thank you for calling, Angela.
I'm not. Thank you so much for taking my call. You have a good night and have a great show.
You too. Thank you.
I love listening to your shows. They're awesome.
Awesome. What else, do you listen to the other shows too? What other shows do you listen to or watch?
You mean like yours, or do you have other shows, or are you just talking about other people?
Yeah, other YouTubers. Do you watch other? I mean, I'm assuming you watch us on YouTube. Who else do you watch on YouTube that you like?
I watch Aiden. I watch Sean. I like Kim. Let's see. Who else? All the ones who have common sense.
There you go. Thank you for calling.
Those are the most. I even got my aunt on X to watch everything and see everything too. So
should I say hi to your aunt? What's your aunt's name? Auntie what? Aunt
Kathy.
Hi, Aunt Kathy.
It took a minute, trust me, to get her on X.
Yeah. Well, hopefully she's watching on X, and we just said hi to her.
That is great. Thank you so much,
Angela. Have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.
I know. Oh, I love the one. She still had something on in the background, but I let her go because I liked her. That was a good call. 978-560-3155. I can be a grump about the calls. That's the one thing people have to be. I have to warn people about, I guess. I can be a little grumpy. And the number one thing is, do you have your background sounds turned down? Don't let me catch you. We got a 617, I think.
Hello?
Hi, who's on the phone?
Oh, hey. I just shut my computer off for you, Mike. My name's Audra.
You're perfect so far. Audra, you gave me a name and you turned your shit down. You are, you're getting applause tonight, Audra. You are like number one caller tonight.
I've been following you since the beginning of the trial. I've never listened. This trial got me to listen to, tonight with Jack. So, thank you for all you do. And I now listen to Turtle Boy. I really appreciate Sean. I think that Melanie Little does a really good. I like when I get people that are outside of New England. So I like how Melanie Little is really passionate. She's been following it since, I guess, pre-trial, which I didn't follow her, but I went back and watched that stuff. She had that dog guy on, so that was really good. But I was there when you had Better on the first time, so I feel special.
Oh, you were there that night. That's like saying you saw a band perform for the first night. That's amazing.
I caught that live, man.
I
didn't do my homework.
What homework?
I didn't read the Vanity Fair article.
Oh, you haven't.
I have it up. Yeah, and if I had it, if I was in school, I'd run it through ChatGPT so we could talk about it. But I will say that I don't know if you caught it, but Nurse Kim is going to go over all the medical stuff for an hour a week, probably. She said on the weekends, which is really cool because the way that she talked about, I forget her name, the neurologist, not Irini Scorti-Bello, but the other lady, badass tattoos. The way she was talking about her testimony, breaking it down. Everything in this case, you look back and you go, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
That's obvious. The way, then she talked about Flamati and some of his responses, and I'm a nurse. And I don't even think of this stuff because I'm just oh, well, I trust they're on the stand. And, Adam Lally is questioning them so seriously. But my point is, if you look back at it from now, which is easy to say, this isn't a big surprise, you can see every step of the way that Lally dragged everybody out, went through all these stupid little details, and then one by one just pulled it over everybody's eyes. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for calling, Audra. Are you calling from Massachusetts or somewhere else?
Oh, I'm calling from East Boston.
Eastie in the house. Awesome. I love
Eastie.
it. You're a local.
I'm BLT. I'm the brave little toaster avatar that sent you a super chat tonight.
Awesome. It's B as in boy, BLT, bacon, lettuce, tomato, or D as in David?
Well, look at the photo of my avatar. If you ever think of it, it's the brave little
toaster.
toaster.
Just gave us $20. Thank you so much. BLT right there.
Yeah, my brave little toaster.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I really appreciate it. I'm happy to just give my 2 cents and support you. And much love to LTL. That guy is passionate.
You like LTL too? He's a good guy. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And do you have any other YouTubers you like?
I like Lawyer, he's got I like him for brevity.
Who is it? I didn't hear
he would Lawyer,
Oh, Lawyer, yeah, he's good. He is very good. What's his first name? Peter
Tragos.
Yeah.
Tragos.
Yeah.
I like him because he's very quick, and he wants to get through the content because he wants to teach about it. He's good to catch up and kind of get that a little bit middle of the road, sensible opinion. Yeah. Oh, and I just want to say this. I've been dying to say this. I can't look at that guy, Plevin. I can't look at his face. Like, I know this sounds horrible, but it's just, I now feel like I'm just talking to you and like not 100 people in the chat, but it's just awful. There's a great joke from 30 Rock where Liz Lemon turns to, I forget it, Pete, who has like a receding hairline, and says, Pete, did anybody ever tell you like a condom that fell on the floor of a barber shop? So that's what I think about Plevin. I love you, Mike. My love to everybody.
Thank you so much,
Have a good
Audra.
night,
BLT from Eastie. Thank you so much for calling in.
Cool. Keep the content coming, buddy.
Again.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Will do. Take care.
I love it. I love the first-time callers. I love it. I love a lot of women call. Locals, national. We had Mexico City. We have them all over the place. Ah, man. I'm like, do I want to take another call tonight? You know what I want to do is I want to try to get through a couple. Make sure I got all my super chats done. Hold on one second. I want to check something else out too. I got to go through some of these Venmo. I got a Venmo today for Mary Jean for $10. She says, thank you for supporting Sean today. He deserves it. I think that's about it on there, which I really... Perfect. One second here. Sorry about this. I'm trying to... why they change it. It's hard to find the... I'm such a boomer tonight. I'm a wicked boomer. I'm having trouble finding everything on my phone. All right. I think I might wrap it up early, actually, because I did do 2 shows, so I think that's what I'm going to do tonight. That was a good last call. I really appreciate Jack. I had just an interview with Jack. That was great. Took a couple calls. We took calls earlier today. I did my spiel. I'm not sure when I'm going to be back for the next show, but there will be more shows. You know they will. Just check the Young Jurks YouTube. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And again, I want to thank everyone. We had another 9 super chats tonight. Hope I got them all up there. Danelle, thank you. Or is that Danet? Danet Delph. I can't even read anymore. Like this. It's like the glare, too. It's hard to read. Sherry D. I want to thank Megan. BLT. Linda M. Little G. Crazy Busy Mom. Miss Nomer. And I want to thank our moderators, MJ, especially in the chat tonight. Thank you so much, MJ. And Stephanie and Jen and Scott. All right, everyone. Have a good night. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon. Young Jurks checking out. Peace.